Welcome to the Redeemer Podcast. I'm your host, Zach, and today we are exploring what it's like to be a transfer student at Redeemer University. I'm joined by current transfer student Isle, who shares her experience transferring from a public university to Redeemer. If it is your first time here, make sure to like and subscribe, share with a friend, and check out some of our other episodes that explore various aspects of Redeemer, Christian education, and so much more. Thank you for making us part of your day. And with that, here we go. All right, it's time. We're here. Anyone who knows me knows that I am the transfer admissions counselor at Redeemer University, and I am so excited for this episode to talk about transferring to Redeemer, the transfer process, and who better to talk about it than a current Redeemer student who's also a transfer student to Redeemer. Isle, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Zach. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, how are you doing today?
I am doing so well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Anytime I get the chance to talk about transferring, uh, talking transfer students and the Redeemer podcast, those are like two of my favorite things. How could
This
it
is
not
your
be?
jam.
I
Yeah.
know, I know. So anyway, enough about me. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and talk about it. We're gonna talk about being a transfer student and a little bit of your story and just kind of the general process of it. Let's maybe start with could you introduce yourself, your program of study, and kind of what brought you to Redeemer?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Isle. I am currently studying missions and ministry, but you'll find out as I share that that's not what I was always studying. Um, and yeah, I am a transfer student. I was studying international development at another just public school in Ontario. Um, and yeah, I loved international development. I came into it kind of with this intention to get into law. My dad was a lawyer growing up, so that was a heavy influence on me. And I just never saw myself doing business or math or science. And yeah, I think being a Christian also influenced my desire to get into international development.
Mhm.
Um, but I think I very quickly discovered, yeah, international development without the hope of the gospel can be really discouraging and just hopeless because yeah, you're looking at kind of the problems of the world and how we can kind of like solve them, I guess. And yeah, everything can just be really subjective when it's coming from the perspective of kind of like a secular school.
Mhm.
And I noticed that early on, but I loved. I loved the school. I joined a campus ministry there, and yeah, and I joined like a local church, and everything was just so great in my life in this new city that I moved to. Except school, which is funny because school is the reason I was in that city. Um, yeah, and I was kind of navigating that, and my mom was encouraging me to like, be a light in your program, all these things. I was like, okay, mom, I'm gonna be a light. And then as the years kind of progressed, I realized, and this is like on me. I'm sure there are some people who are stronger than me, but I realized I was getting influenced, I guess, more than I was being a light. And yeah, I found myself kind of like actively rejecting things I was learning in class or saying things in discussion groups or in my papers that I didn't necessarily agree with, just so I could get a good grade. Um, and it came to a point where I was like, yeah, this is supposed to be my education, but I'm gaining nothing from it. I'm kind of just doing it to get a degree. So I kind of sat in that for a bit. And my friends and my people knew about this and they were encouraging me, oh, why don't you switch programs? This program might be good for you, all these things. And at the same time as this, my sister graduated from her undergrad and was applying to teachers college. And one of her options was Redeemer. So
Oh.
I found out about Redeemer through my older sister, and she like was raving about it after she found out about it. She's like, look at this school. It's like Christian education and like all these things. I also helped her with her application. Don't tell admissions people that, but in that process, I told her like, hey, you should like really look at the website and see what their values are and kind of include that in your application. So as I was helping her do that, I myself was exploring the Redeemer website, and I'm like, hold on, this seems like a great institution. I'm so happy my sister's applying here. And then I come across their programs and I see that they have an international development program. So I read kind of the course outline and the things that you can do with that degree or what makes international development at Redeemer different. And it was a moment of like, whoa, reading the outline, I'm like, this answers kind of all the issues that I had studying international development at a secular university.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and it was so like just the timing of everything. I was like, wow, this is really cool. I feel like this is something that could be great for me. I'd also say I took my faith seriously later in life, and because of that, I definitely like lacked certain foundations. Um, Sorry, my housemate just walked by. Maybe you could cut that out. Um, but yeah, I took my faith seriously later in life. So I kind of recognized in my young adulthood that I lacked a lot of certain foundations. Um, and another thing that really attracted me to Redeemer was the core curriculum and seeing how they want all their students to kind of build this, like take these classes that help you build your Christian worldview, and just be like, yeah, just really well versed in it. And I thought that was something I could really gain because I witnessed firsthand how I was kind of quick to compromise at my other school, or I didn't really know what I believed or didn't know what, yeah, like what hills to die on and things like that. So that was like, this is knowledge and wisdom that I want to gain. Um, but I was like, I've been at my other school for 3 years. This isn't really like a serious thought. So I sent an inquiry email, just like a transfer inquiry email of like, what would transferring look like? And it goes to Mr. Zach Chester.
That's uh, wow.
Yep,
Oh wow. I'm so honored
I have these
and
emails. So I look back on them and it's so cool. You told me that the deadline for accepting and applying transfers had passed. But you told me if I got it to you by the end of that weekend, you'd accept it and you would waive the fee. And I was like, this is probably on like a Monday.
Yep.
And I was like, whoa, okay, that's awesome. And I spent that whole week like praying, discerning with mentors. I told my mom, um, initial feedback, don't do it. Everyone was like, this is a big change. And I was incredibly involved in like my other school
Yeah.
and I had great community. I was ready to settle down in that city. It made no sense, I think, from an outside perspective of like I had a really good life there. It made no sense for me to transfer. But like for me and the people walking closely with me, they knew that school was something I had been struggling with, and I felt like I wasn't learning. And just seeing how Redeemer could speak into and fit all those things that I like needed in order to like develop more as a human, yeah, I think I really saw God soften people's hearts and come from this place of like, why would you do that? That's crazy, to like enthusiastic, yes, we think you should be at this institution. Um, yeah, and because it was so hard to kind of let go of my community there, I remember that summer I was kind of discerning like, I don't have to move to Redeemer. I don't have to move to Ancaster. I'm a big city girl. So I'm like, I do not want to move there. Maybe I can just stay in my city and do Redeemer online, because in my head, the only way Redeemer could benefit me was education.
Yeah.
I was like, I already have my people. I don't need the community, all these things. And someone challenged me where she was like, because my whole thing was like, although this doesn't make sense, I'm so convinced this is where God wants me to go.
Yeah.
And she challenged me and was like, if you're so convinced God wants you to go there, why are you trying to compromise? Why are you trying to stay in the city? And this is a near and dear friend who didn't want me to move.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, wow, okay. um, and then, yeah, I spent that summer saying goodbye to my friends in my other city, and I made the move to Ancaster, and now I'm here.
Wow! I thank you so much for sharing and taking us. And you did a great job summarizing your story. I'm sure there's a lot more to it and a lot more
It's a whole story.
conversation.
Yep.
But could I maybe just ask a follow up question to that? Is so when you're kind of going, if you can remember going back to when you hadn't decided yet, what were and you had family and friends asking you questions or maybe challenge you because when I work with transfer students, often they feel like they're the only person that is thinking of transferring, right? Because it's not like when you're applying at a high school, like it's a very like solo decision to make.
Mhm.
Where like where did you kind of get to the point where you realized like, oh, like transferring is normal, it happens at every institution every semester, and like
Mhm.
did that provide any comfort for you in like helping to normalize it?
Mhm. Um, One thing that really helped me actually was a call I had with you.
Oh.
Um, I had a call with you, and you had mentioned how I was like the third transfer student you were talking to that day, and that really like encouraged me because I think you had mentioned that there were people with similar stories from mine. Um, I think being a transfer student, specifically from a public like a public school to a Christian school, those transfer stories are usually similar
Mhm.
because they're not just trying to leave your current situation and moving to like another school with a better program or whatever, but like
Yeah.
usually it's faith related. Um, and yeah, that was really reassuring for me. It became more reassuring once I got to Redeemer and actually met and
Yeah.
heard the stories of so many transfer students. I remember an insecurity I had coming to Redeemer was like, I'm a transfer student coming from third year. I'm going to be older. I'm going to be surrounded by 17-year-olds and all these things. But there are people of all ages at Redeemer who
Hmm.
have, yeah, very similar stories of desiring to pursue like a Christian education. Um, yeah, and I promise you, if you're a transfer student, you are not going to be alone.
Yeah, yeah, and again, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that, and just it's an honor to get to work with transfer students because I know it is a big decision. So could you share? So when you came to Redeemer, did you live on campus right away? Were you living with other transfer students? Like, because I know some transfer students they want to live in like a first year dorm, and that's sometimes an opportunity. Others, prefer to be with upper year students. What was your experience first moving to Redeemer?
So when I first moved to Redeemer, I did not live on campus. I lived in a house in the neighborhood. I lived with my sister,
Yep.
but then I lived with a bunch of other young adults who went to McMaster.
Right.
Um, and I thought that was, yeah, I really enjoyed that experience because, yeah, just for me personally, as like an older transfer student, I did not necessarily want to be like living, like, I don't know, I think I had this idea in my head that I already had gone through the whole like finding my people kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think God also really humbled that in me because that was like a whole thing I struggled with moving to Redeemer is like, I don't need to make friends here because I already have my people. I'm just gonna stay here, get my degree, and then I'm gonna move back to my city and be with my people. And oh man, like that has just completely changed. I have met such great people here
Hmm.
at Redeemer, at my church, just in this city and like that's not the case anymore. I could see myself settling down here wherever the Lord leads. But yeah, I was living off campus, but it's a school in it's a house in the neighborhood, so
Yeah.
I still very much feel like I'm part of the Redeemer community.
Hmm. Definitely. And could you maybe just expand upon that? Is you know you've talked about your experience kind of entering into the Redeemer community, but what does experiencing the Redeemer community look like for you?
Oh man, that's a great question. Something I love about Redeemer, which I thought I was going to hate, actually, what is the size? Um, I remember coming here, seeing like the campus is so small. This population is not too big. I'm very much a people person. I like crowds. Um, yeah, like genuinely coming into Redeemer, I was like, I'm just here to get my education. Um, but being at Redeemer is so much more than just the education. Um, yeah, kind of like what I was saying earlier, I thought it would be harder because I am an older student. Um, but you meet so many other older students who are walking through similar stages in life. And also, everyone here truly is so welcoming since it's not a big school. Truly, if you make the effort to talk to your classmates and to talk to profs, everyone is super nice and it's a place where you can be really seen. One of my favorite things about Redeemer is just how you build a personal relationship with your prof. And that is not something that happens naturally or organically at a really big school. I don't think profs at big schools mean to, but yeah, there are ways where you kind of can just be treated kind of like a number. And that's not intentional or malicious on their end, but at a big school, like you don't have the capacity to care for all your students in the same way. And I find here that the profs um, are also invested in your life and in your faith. So they're teaching you these things, but like my profs will go on tangents about like the randomest things or about like life experiences or about just some wise thing. And I'm like taking notes of their tangents because I'm like, this is wisdom that I can take for my life. It's not just
Hmm.
this course about this specific thing. Like this is something I can carry with me and that I can apply to other areas of my life. So yeah, one thing I love about the Redeemer community is just like your profs are part of your community.
Yep.
Um, and yeah, it can like I think Redeemer is intentional with clubs and with like wellness week events, for example, just spaces where people can gather. And because it is not too big, yeah, I feel like it's a place where you can really be seen.
Hmm. Awesome. No, thank you for sharing. Those are great. And kind of just I want, again, your story is so interesting. I appreciate it. Is so you came to Redeemer and you came for international development, but when, because you switched programs, right?
I like to think that international development was the means for the end of me ending up in missions and ministry. Because, sorry, I think about my life at my other school. There is no way I would have considered
Yeah.
pursuing a ministry degree, but I could pursue an international development degree at a Christian school. Um, like there was just no way my family would have accepted that I even wanted to do that. Um, I definitely had a heart for ministry and for the church and for, um, yeah, just like living for Jesus. But I never thought it would be something I was doing, like I would pursue vocationally.
Yeah.
Um, but coming to Redeemer and taking international development classes, which were really great, but loving my religion and ministry classes so much more. Um, yeah, I this is a whole story that involves also like being part of my local church and just people speaking into my life and kind of just realizing like what I want to do with my life. Um, the things I'm learning in class in my missions and ministry degree are things I would kind of like Google for free on the side. Like, yeah, I'd be like doing my homework or doing my school stuff, but then I'll be reading articles about like, yeah, just like faith or spiritual disciplines or spiritual formations. Um, and I kind of realized I was at this point where I was like, I go to a school that teaches this and tests you on it and makes it like makes sure that you are familiar with this material. And there are professors who are wise and have all this knowledge. And I'm like, I want to gain that knowledge. I Yes, I could Google these on the side and research and all that stuff, but like I'm at this institution where this is available. Why not pursue it?
Why
Um,
not? Yeah.
yeah, and it's not just a why not. Like there was a lot of prayer
Yeah.
and like telling my family was a whole nother thing because my family did not want me working in ministry. I think they have since grown and the Lord has softened their heart, which is really awesome. But yeah,
Oh
just like
man.
lots of influences that led to that decision. But the fact that like, yeah, this is a school that has that like that is such a unique opportunity and I'm already here. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, I like to think that international development was the means to the end because there's no way I would have immediately pursued a ministry degree. Maybe that's my pride. So, but yeah, I'm glad I'm here. Oh man, I love what I'm learning.
That's awesome. And going back to just transfer students in general, could you talk about, are there, what would you say is the biggest difference between studying at like a large public institution that you were at to studying at a smaller private Christian institution like Redeemer?
Yeah, I think one good thing, yeah, definitely like kind of what I was saying earlier, with the size, you are not just a number. You can reach out for help. You can, and help on like multiple fronts, whether it's help with tutoring,
Mhm.
whether it's help with talking to a prof, whether it's help with mental health issues, or like learning services is really helpful. Yeah, you just feel supported. Like, I do not feel like I'm just a number. I feel like I can be known when I'm walking through the halls. That doesn't happen yeah, at a big school. At a big school, if you run into someone, like one or two people in the entire day, that's like a highlight of the day for me. Here, it happens all the time. Um, yeah, so it's just fun being like known and seen. And I think that also helps with how you do school and how you study and how you pursue education, because you have that support and it kind of freely helps you, like, yeah, study and pursue your education knowing that you have that support. um, and yeah, it is, like, I would say the support is the biggest thing. And
Yeah.
I'd say one, not necessarily bad, but like a negative maybe, difference between like a big public school versus, I think like a big public school, specifically like not Christian, versus like a small Christian university, is that I think you really have to actively fight being in the Christian bubble, um, because you're so supported and everything is so like nice and everyone for the most part shares the same worldview as you. It can be easy to kind of stay in that comfort zone and be like, I love it here, I don't want to leave this comfort. But I think like as Christians, we are also, yeah, called to like take up space, and like
Mhm.
meet the needs of the marginalized and do all those things. And yeah, I think that's something we have to actively be aware of and kind of like actively fight the desire to stay in your comfortable Christian bubble. Um,
Mhm.
but I know Redeemer
I
provides a lot of opportunities for us to like go into like Lower Hamilton and serve. So yeah, really avail of like those opportunities.
Yeah, I had a mentor of mine when I was a student at Redeemer. I remember he said to me, he said, Zach, people idolize the Christian bubble so much. It really only exists if you allow it to, right?
Hmm.
And take those opportunities to go meet people downtown. Maybe it's working a job off campus, but
Mm-hmm.
making sure that you're not just in an echo chamber all the time, for
Oh
sure. So
yeah.
no, I
Yeah.
appreciate that perspective for sure, because yeah, that is a dramatic difference of attending a private Christian institution like Redeemer, for sure. um
Hmm.
Kind of, I again, I'll thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and talking about this. But maybe could you give any advice to students who are thinking of transferring to Redeemer? What advice would you give prospective transfer students?
Hmm. Um, Honestly, a big piece of advice is talk to you. I think talking to you and having, I'm not, he didn't pay me to say this. Okay. Genuinely, Zach is like a
No, I
big
did
part of
not.
my
No.
transfer process. Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
think like talking to you and having my questions answered was really reassuring and helpful. Um, I would also say, yeah, like research the school, see all the ways that they could support you, and see if it's something you desire. And yeah, like I would say another piece of advice I had was just like coming into it, fighting the Christian bubble. But we already talked about that, because it is a very drastic difference. I think specifically coming from like, oh, just a public university and coming here, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to leave this. But yeah, just being
Yeah.
really conscious to like, um, fight that. Um, but yeah, I would say like talk to Zach, do your research, as you consider the school. And for anyone who wants to transfer, from my perspective, I'm like, do it, um,
Yeah.
because like with the core curriculum and just the things you're learning and the profs that you have access to, if you are a Christian, whether you pursue vocational ministry or not, I think a Redeemer education is something of great value and something that's not available everywhere.
Mhm.
So the fact that we have the opportunity to study here, that's something I tell people often. If you're a transfer student, come here and like testify to the privilege it is to have a Christian education, because I'll have friends studying at like Mac, for example, who I'll tell them about the things I'm learning in class, and they're like, "Wow, that is so cool that you get to learn that, and that your profs care about that, because yeah, it can be easy to like get used to the fact that this is the education that we have, but it is not the case for Christians at other schools, right? Like they have to like sometimes reject some of the things they're learning, or they want to use their time to learn about these things, but they can't because they have to study their actual course load. Coursework. But yeah, sorry, those were kind of tangents, but I'd say talk to Zach, do your research and see like all the ways that the school could benefit and support you. Fight the Christian bubble. And what was the last thing I mentioned? Oh, yeah, like if you do end up transferring, testify to the privilege that it is to have a Christian education.
That's great advice. No, when Al says talk to Zach, that's because I am the transfer admissions counselor here at Redeemer, and any any anyone in the admissions department is a good person to talk to, but they'll likely refer you to me if you're a transfer student. Because we wanted to get to know you. We want to know your name. Feel free to email us at admissions@redeemer.com or .ca. So admissions@redeemer.ca, and we will be happy to connect with you one-on-one. But thank you so much. You gave so much great insight into being a transfer student at Redeemer. Appreciate your story and appreciate what the Lord is doing in your life. And yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun.
And if you are a prospective transfer student or a transfer student that maybe you're not considering Redeemer, but now you are after watching this, like I said, feel free to email us admissions@redeemer.ca. God bless, and we will see you in the next episode.